Hello and welcome, my name is Nightfall, and today, take a look at my top 10 Warlock Exotics in Destiny 2 Season of the Seraph. And hopefully by the end of this video, you'll have a good idea of the Warlock meta, as well as a PvP and PvE rankings for every single exotic in the game. And of course, as always, I have made a spreadsheet for this video, which can still be found at my Discord, or link in the description down below on the channel #SpreadsheetTalks. And as you probably know, these spreadsheets are supported by my patrons on Patreon. So if you like these spreadsheets and you want to see them continue, please come check them out in the description down below. And things have gotten a bit better, and I really do appreciate your support, but I still do need some more help. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. On screen right now, this is my spreadsheet. All of its dark theme, color-coded pictures, recommendations, and PvE and PvP rankings for all the different exotics for the Warlocks in the game. And just a little bit of a TLDR on Warlocks right now is that they're not really doing that well. Out of the three classes, oftentimes we joke about how they're in 4th place. And that being said, there are options that Warlocks do get in the higher level plays in both kinds of modes, but they are very, very limited and often overbeared by other classes. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. At number 10, we have the Aeon Soul. For pretty much the same reasons as all the other Aeon exotics, you can spawn in heavy ammo and special ammo in Grandmaster Nightfalls, which is incredibly useful. Essentially, it's a great default exotic. If you don't have a particular exotic that you need to use for your build, you can summon heavy ammo for your team. Keeping in mind, sometimes in the artifact, there'll be certain mods that allow you to spawn in heavy ammo in different ways, either allowing you to double up on those particular ways, and sometimes those artifact mods will be strong enough you won't need this. And to be clear, technically there are more bonuses with more teammates using Aeon, but those bonuses are not usually cared about nearly as much as those heavy and special ammo spawners. Following that, at number 9, we have the Rain of Fire, which used to be very strong in the Crucible, being able to use with Vex Mythic class, with other fusion rifles, and of course linear fusion rifles when they were really strong about a season ago. And technically it can still be used in very similar ways, but again, we had nerfs to fusion rifles, nerfs to linear fusion rifles, that they aren't as used in PvP, definitely more of a PvE exotic these days. That being said, Vex Mythic class in PvP is still a great option and a very easy way to get Radiant from this thing, on top of air dodging to reload all your weapons, on top of airborne effectiveness with those weapons as well. After that, at number 8, we have the Eye of Another World, one of those base game exotics that just give you basic stat bonuses that is still really great, again, as a good default for PvP. Especially if you have an ability-based build and you don't have a particular exotic that you want to use with it, Eye of Another World gives you great regeneration for your grenade, your melee, your rift, and you also get that highlight on priority targets. And I sometimes do still see people using this in PvE. I do think there are better options in PvE, but it's again, a good default. Following that, at number 7, we have the Stag, which is used in a lot of the same ways as before, although technically Arc 3.0 was a bit of a disappointment for, in particular, the Warlocks. If you haven't heard of it, your Rift provides you damage resistance to you and your allies within it, and you also get Rift energy when you're critically wounded and drop a Rift on your corpse whenever you die, which allows your Rifts to come back very easily and very quickly, and of course allows your teammates to res you if it is a res-based game mode. And with that, oftentimes we do use this with Arc because we can have the Arc buddies, and considering how often you can make Rifts, those Arc buddies really do a lot, and again, give it to your teammates as well. And I think the Arc buddies did get buffed recently. After that, at number 6, we have the Osmiomancy gloves. In my opinion, one of the more underrated exotics in the game, where your cold snap grenades have an additional charge, so overflow charging, really nice to have. They recharge quicker on direct impact. I believe you have to get basically 2 direct impacts, either by bonking on them on the head with a grenade or letting the little trackers hit them, and the seekers spawned from cold snap grenades travel further, which makes it much more likely to happen. In PvP, obviously stasis is a good option for the Warlock, especially with that freezing melee, and cold snap grenades actually got a little bit better targeting this season, and obviously freezing your enemy is very useful. But it's also very useful in PvE as well, especially if you're using the Bleak Watcher turrets, the little stasis shooting turrets. You have double grenade charges of those, and you can also get your grenades a lot faster just by using them as cold snap grenades. My personal recommendation would be to pair this up with something that has big AoE damage, like something like Witherhoard or Osteostriga, because you can freeze a whole room of enemies. As long as you can actually take them out, you're just going to continually freeze them. So you need to pair it up with some output of damage. Up next after that, at number 5, we have the Verity's Brow, which is an incredible exotic, in my opinion, very underrated by a lot of people use it. The only big downside to this is the fact that it is universal, and most of the time there is a better option in almost every subclass. And this season we did reappreciate it because of that fact. Now, if you've never heard of it, weapon final blows with the damage type matching your subclass, so if you're using solar, using a solar weapon, will give you stacks of death throws. And each stack of death throw gives you 20% more grenade damage, up to 5 stacks, and also gives you 50% faster grenade regeneration, up to 5 stacks. And whenever you have death throws and you throw a grenade, nearby allies also get an increase to their grenade regeneration based on the stacks of death throws, which is a great thing to have on a team because you can really help your arc grenade titans really do a lot of damage, on top of obviously doing damage with your stuff as well. And it does seem a bit complicated, but it is simpler than people think. Again, just match your primary weapon with your subclass damage type and you're getting the bonuses. The big downside is, again, there are better options for everything. Starfire Protocol dominating solar, Osmiomancy dominating stasis, arc really not that good, so bad grenades. And honestly, the only thing it really competes with is Controverse Hold in Void, which Controverse is higher rated. And the big difference is that Verity's Brow does require kills and Controverse does not, even though the bonuses from Verity's Brow are a lot better. Moving on, up next at number 4, we have the Transversive Steps, which did get technically indirectly buffed by the fact that they actually removed the penalty for shotgun sliding pellets, which happened in a hot patch recently. And because this exotic is based on sprint speed and slide distance, as well as the auto-loading properties, it does make it slightly better. And if you don't know why this particular exotic is amazing, it's most of the time it's speed. The fact you can move faster makes you harder to hit, and makes it so you can chase down enemies easier. It's just always good to be faster in the Crucible. And I would argue in PvE, finishing strikes faster and stuff like that is also really nice as well. Up next at number 3, we have Ophidian Aspects, which is gonna be the best PvP option for the Warlock in almost every scenario. Again, Warlocks are really not that strong in the meta. If you look at things like Trial Support, they're such a fraction of the actual player. But Ophidian Aspect is gonna give them the best possible advantage, being able to have weapons ready and reload very quickly, as well as all handling application, and of course melee range is extended, which they already have the best ranged melee. Not the best melee, but the best range of melee. And to be fair, it's not nearly as fast as something like Dragon Shadow, but it is something that happens all the time across every single subclass, and making slower weapons a lot faster, especially with split-second decision-making in PvP, is very strong. And it also helps with weapons that you really need fast aim-down sights, like for example snipers without snapshot, or things you need better sprint to fire speed. Ophidian Aspect just makes your guns a lot better. Following that at number 2, we have the Controverse Hold, which has been very high up on the list for a very long time, and honestly, it's very simple. Essentially, resist incoming damage while charging in one of your charge grenades, and whenever you get a hit with it, you get a certain amount of grenade energy back. And a pro tip is if you're using a Vortex grenade, which I personally recommend, the first hit will trigger this, and 5 seconds later, the last hit will also trigger it. You combine that with one hit of Devour, which gives you like 30 or 40% of your grenade back, you'll get your full grenade for just hitting enemies with your grenade, which allows you again to weaken targets if you have that thing on the particular fragment, on top of all the other benefits you can get from Void, which include things like Devour and Volatile, etc, etc. And I think the big key thing to take away here is that firstly, Void is actually a decent option for Warlocks in PvE. The super itself scales very well into the high level. The weaken effect and volatile and debuffing enemies is also really nice. And the fact is you do not need a kill for this exotic to give you those benefits, which in my opinion makes it de facto king for Void because it's just so simple. And finally, at number 1, we have Starfire Protocol, which is also a 9 out of 10 in PvE, more specifically for solar stuff, and in my opinion is pretty much the only thing I use in PvE on Warlocks these days. Keeping in mind there are certain things you might want to use instead, and I do try to mix it up, but generally you can use Starfire Protocol with double explosion fusion grenades for pretty much everything in the game in PvE. If you don't know, this exotic gives you additional fusion grenade charges, so overflow charging, and recharges from a powered weapon damage, so stand in a powering rift or a well and do damage, you get about a fourth of your grenade back. And furthermore, fusion grenade kills also give you a full rift, so something I do all the time, toss a fusion grenade, throw a rift down. By the time the rift finishes going down, the fusion grenade gets a kill, I get my full rift back, and then I'm shooting a bunch of enemies, including immune enemies, which also give my grenade back. And one of the best ways to use this is going to be with Wither Horde or Anarchy, stick a boss target, and you're basically just chucking these grenades continuously. The DPS output you have from these AoE exploding fusion grenades is actually similar to that of the Lament, which is some of the highest DPS in the game. A lot of the times it's going to be better than Lament because it's infinite. You don't care about heavy ammunition, all you care about is getting a rift, your grenade, and doing damage from it. The only downside from Starfire Protocol, other than the fact that it requires fusion grenades, which is fine because it's one of the best, it requires solar, which is fine because well is one of the best, is the fact that you're not using a healing rift, which was the only reason that I ever picked empowering rifts. So much so that oftentimes when I should be using Lunafaction in raids, I still keep Starfire Protocol, because grenades are incredible. And of course, again, if you like cute animals on screen, go ahead and check out my Patreon. Yes, that's what I said. And these spreadsheets are supported by those cute animals, and of course your support on Patreon. So if you want to see them continue, both the cute animals and of course the spreadsheets, go check out my Patreon, link in the description down below. And that's it. Hope you guys did enjoy. My name's Chronic, and I'll see you guys on the next one.